Yeah, it's
Amy.
It's the beginning.
Amy. Does that work for you?
Mr. Root at 6 o'clock.
Welcome to the January 25th, 2024 Parma City School District Board of Education meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Kohar.
Here.
Ms. Kerpeck.
Present.
Mrs. McTaggart.
Present.
Mr. Ruda.
Present.
Mr. Vaughn.
Present.
Dr. Smilek, can you please confirm that this meeting is currently being live streamed?
Yes, it is.
Can you please monitor the live streaming throughout the meeting, and if there is a problem, speak up immediately so that the technical difficulty can be addressed?
Yes, we will.
Thank you. That takes us to our first thing, Parma Proud, Dr. Smilek.
Thank you. As we have done through a series of meetings this school year, we are recognizing families that display very impressive resilience in their approach to education. These are folks that have had any number of challenges in their lives, and sometimes our principals do a great job of explaining that. Other times the families prefer a little bit more general reference, depending on what circumstances may be. Tonight we are joined by 4 families from First Step. We're very grateful that you took the time to be here tonight. We're very grateful that you have worked through whatever it is your challenges may be to continue to focus on the education we provide here, and certainly the education that your students receive. So at this time I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Savilic, who is our First Step preschool coordinator and principal. Mr. Rudy, you want to go down front, sir?
Good evening. Can you hear me? Does that sound okay? Take it off. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lara Savilic, and I am the proud First Step preschool principal at First Step. I'm a Parma graduate as well, and I am humbly and honored to present our resilient kiddos from First Step tonight. So thank you for letting me share them with you. Okay. Click. So when we think about resiliency in preschool, I like to think of this quote, and I'd like to share it with our board members and Dr. Smilek and Mr. Nucio. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows at the end of the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So I have 4 awesome First Step Fireflies that I would like to present to you today. Our first one is Hannah Rotino. Hannah is 4 years old. Proud parents are Megan and Nick Rotino, okay? And Eli is her brother, who is a 6th grader at Greenbrier Middle School, okay? Are masks okay? Do you want masks? Oh, no. You're okay? Okay, never mind then. Okay, thank you. You're okay? It's okay? Okay. Hannah is a bilateral retinoblastoma pediatric cancer warrior. She has beat 4 eye tumors and now has a prosthetic eye. She likes to call this her magic eye, and one day she hopes to have that eye be made up of rainbow sparkles. Next week, Hannah will have her 20th eye exam. She's only 4 years old, under anesthesia, and she will have her 7th MRI. Hannah will be disease-free since January 2022 and will be monitored due to her RB1 gene. She is a gymnast, an artist, I've seen your artwork, a swimmer, and a hero. Congratulations, Hannah. I'm so proud of you. Okay, next is Aubrey Evans. She is 4 years old to the proud parents of Ashley and David Evans. You'll see Ashley around my building helping out with PTA, and her wonderful grandparents are Jackie and Jeff Tony. They have always helped with our fast evenings. Aubrey was born at 24 weeks and spent 142 days in the NICU, with many therapy and medical appointments to follow. Aubrey's parents feel that their daughter is the definition of resilience and bravery as she faces obstacles with a smile on her face and never lets cerebral palsy define her. She loves engaging with her friends and showing off her wheels. They're pretty fast. And Aubrey's mother stated, "Sending your baby off to school for the first time is scary. Sending your nonverbal and non-mobile child is terrifying, yet she is thriving." They are thankful to everyone who acknowledges her handicap as a bump in the road, not the end of the road. Aubrey's parents are thankful to the First Step staff who goes above and beyond for her daughter. Congratulations. Okay. All right, Cecilia Greenewalt. We also know her as Cece. She is 5 years old to the proud parents of Nick and Gina Greenewalt. You'll see Gina around my building as well as our fearless leader, as our PTA president, and Mr. Greenewalt fixing our atrium all the time. Thank you, Nick. Her younger brother, who's so supportive, his name is Miles. When we met Cece, Miles was just a baby. We met her at 2 years old. So Cece refuses to be defined by her brain injury. She continues to find ways to succeed in a world that isn't always accommodating. Everyone who encounters Cece knows that she's something special. Cece's family has quickly learned there's no way of knowing what the future holds for children like Cece, but to never count them out. Cece enjoys her music, her friends, and her family. Mr. and Mrs. Greenewalt are so grateful to see Cece thrive at preschool and to be able to socialize and play. Congratulations. Okay, last but not least, Carter Strikard, who is 5 years old. Many of you know his parents, Jason, who has held a board seat, and Melissa, who is also highly involved with our PTA. Carter was born, or he also has brothers Alonzo at Greenbrier, Nolan and Liam at PV, who are also First Step graduates, and Ezekiel, who's just 2 years old. Carter was born at just 23 weeks, weighing 1 pound and 3 ounces. He is diagnosed with cerebral palsy and was placed in the Strikard home after his first birthday as a foster child. Melissa and Jason adopted him officially in 2021. After being told he would never walk or talk, through the family's love, support, and hard work, he is now talking and running through our halls and practicing his pre-K academic skills. Carter has a contagious smile and enjoys greeting his peers and staff at First Step Preschool. Both Mr. and Mrs. Strikehart believe that every time their boys were told that they couldn't do something, their sons overcame it with adversity, and they only have opportunities to shine and thrive. Congratulations, Carter. Thank you so much for letting us share our fantastic fireflies. We appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you, Mrs. Savilik. Thank you again, families, for being here. It is definitely a socially appropriate time to leave. If you would like, you're certainly welcome to stay for our meeting, but we appreciate your being here tonight and assume that you have some other functions that you might want to get to. Bath, story, all those great family functions on a rainy Thursday night in January. Mrs. Villick, thank you again.
Thank you.
The next piece, Mr. Ruda, is actually for me, and the board has this handout, and Ms. Ivanko is going to project this as well for our community to see. I thought that with certainly 3 new board members and certainly engaged community that's going through a strategic planning process, I thought that it would be important to spend some time going through some of our nuts and bolts of finance. Grateful for Mr. Nucio taking some time last meeting to have Mr. Pendleton in from the ESC. He's a very well-respected treasurer in the area. But that was more about state funding and how we get our money. And so now I think it's important that we look at specific statistics relative to actual Parma and the Parma City School District. And so that's what we're going to take some time to go through. Now, I have to acknowledge that anytime you have a presentation with a pretty good amount of detail, it can often lead to more questions, and I may not be able to answer those tonight, and that's completely fine. But to our board, if you would like to get those to me, or if you want to even ask them tonight, if I can answer them, I certainly will. But again, we're getting into some pretty intricate parts of our district, and I think that's important to state that we may not be able to get further in depth, but we certainly would look forward to answering the questions. So we're going to go through, and I apologize, I know you can read, but there's definitely some things I'd like to accent a little bit, and so if we can just kind of follow along. I think tonight the tone I really want to set is that we have lived by 3 district goals since we've come here, since I began in 2018 and Mr. Nucio began the same year. Actually, he began in end of 17. But we have really embodied the 3rd district goal, which is practicing fiscal responsibility. And as we go through, I think you're going to see sort of the mindset that really has governed all that we do. We understand the financial limitations we face. We understand that it's difficult to pass a levy in Parma, not just under me, certainly, but really throughout the decades. Since the year 2000, we've had 23 asks now for new money. 3 of them have passed. So it's definitely an uphill climb. So we know that we have to live within our means, certainly. And the first bullet point, number 1, our 5-year forecast predicts an $18.4 million deficit in the fiscal year 2027. And that piece of that actually comes straight off of Mr. Nucio's slide from his 5-year forecast. So that's absolutely something that we operate within, understanding that financial reality that we are facing a cliff for fiscal year 2027. We have not passed a new money levy, and I sort of cited our statistics before, but the last actual operating levy that passed was 2011. And just again, for some context, you see some districts there that are near to us that have clearly, passed new money levies since 2011, much more recently than we have. North Olmsted, Rocky River, just a couple years ago. Brooklyn, Fairview Park in 2020. Strongsville, 2019, Berea in 12, Cuyahoga Heights in 12. So we definitely are toward the end of that list. And again, most levy cycles 4 to 6 years, you'll see districts go. We certainly have outlasted ours. We are at now 13 years that we're going on since our last infusion of new operating money from property taxes. Number 3, and I want to be very careful in how we preface this, because I certainly don't ever want people to think that I'm minimizing what they pay or trying to be critical. But I have heard at town halls, and I've heard at surveys, and I've seen on Facebook, that we have the highest taxes in Cuyahoga County in Parma, and I just want to show the context that's not actually accurate. So there's tax rates. And if you look at the tax rates are essentially dollars and cents per $1,000 of tax value. And again, the tax value is actually only 35% you're taxed on. So that's something that I think people forget sometimes too. So if your house is worth $100,000, you're actually only being taxed on $35,000 of that. And I should stop using only, because I know none of us want to pay any more or even pay what we're expected to pay. But I did want to show that Parma itself is at 71.42 as a tax rate. And that ranks 64th out of 81 different taxing entities in Cuyahoga County. I also want to point out taxing entities are pretty unique. You can have one city that has 4 or 5 different taxing entities. Cleveland Heights, for example, there's actually a section of Cleveland Heights that attends South Euclid Lyndhurst schools. So that's actually its own taxing entity. So I just want to clarify that that's why you see the number 81. That's a pretty high number. Parma Heights is 75.17. That's 48th out of, again, 81 taxing entities. And Seven Hills is 42nd. So that would be the higher of the 3 in terms of tax rates. So I'm going to stop every 3 bullets and just see if there's any questions before I move on. And again, have to acknowledge I may not be able to answer, but I'd be happy to get an answer when I can. Seeing none. I also want to point out that I have to give Mr. Nucio a lot of credit in this, just in terms of how he approaches his 5-year forecast. He is extremely conservative in projecting revenue, but I also have to give all of us in the district credit for our fiscal sense and our knowing that we can't just invent positions in Parma and say, let's do that, or let's do that. It better be at least at an equal, if not a lesser dollar value when we look at adding different positions or changing things. We know that we can't just add things in this district. So if you look at the projections and then look at, how we actually have kept putting that deficit off. We started out in 2018, we projected a deficit of $5.1 million in 2022. Now, part of it, I didn't mention in my entree to this, is that we did receive COVID money. ESSER money absolutely helped us. But it wasn't just ESSER money, folks. That was $32 million. $32 million in a 3-year fiscal year cycle, in an approximately $150 million budget. It helps, certainly, but it's all of those things, right? It's conservative spending, it's conservative projections, it's ESSER money. In 2019, the fall forecast projected a deficit by 2024 of $17.8 million. And again, I don't mean to read to you, but you can see how, over the years, we've just kept pushing that off. We projected a deficit in 2022. We haven't had new money. We've had some COVID money, absolutely. But now we're projecting our deficit in 2027. And so I thank Mr. Nucio for his conservative projections, but I also thank all of our staff, because we know that we do more with less in the Parma City School District. Now, I mentioned ESSER funds. That's number 5. We've seen a lot of different explanations of how we used ESSER funds and what we used that money for. And I want to specify that ESSER was a part of ARPA, essentially, the American Relief Act during COVID. And ESSER stands for Elementary Secondary School Emergency Relief Act. I think I got through that. Most of what we spent in ESSER money was not bells and whistles, was not raises for staff, was not some type of pie-in-the-sky dream that we wanted to chase. Most of it was saying, we understand that we have to be extremely fiscally responsible. When we come back, we need to make sure we ask and have to ask for new money from our voters. And so we have this money, and so what we're going to do is use a lot of it to supplant. And that means that all of the expenses you see there, College Now, Naviance, Parma Virtual Learning Academy, intervention specialists, deans of students, if there was a way we could figure out how to take something we were already doing and use ESSER money instead of our general fund for doing that, that's what we did. And that was $21.6 million of that approximately $32 million. Now, we did invest in some long-term resources, lighting and turf at Byers Field. Both of them had far exceeded their life expectancy. And curriculum, which we, again, had some curricular resources literally from the 1970s that were in our classrooms. We had many different adoptions over the last several years, and much of that came from COVID money. So that was $4 million. Then we had some things that were directly COVID related, either specific COVID expenses, like digital tools for PVLA. Summer school was actually designed to sort of remediate the effects. We had free summer school for several years. We waived family fees, so fees that parents see every year. We didn't do any of that. That was about $750,000 because we knew that folks had a hard time during COVID. We didn't want to ask them for one more expense. So when we talk about, well, you got all that COVID money, that COVID money went really back into the budget. I mean, 21 out of $32 million went right back into the general fund budget, and we supplanted, instead of using general funding money, we used COVID money. We've also heard, and Mr. Nucio kind of tipped this off, and I don't blame him because he was just explaining the 5-year forecast when he said, our personnel is 87% of our budget. And he said that that was high, and it is, but I think it's very important that we give you some context as to why it's that high. First, when you think of personnel in a school district, it's about all we are. We're a service-based industry. So personnel isn't some fancy ivory tower. Personnel is coaches, it's folks that are noon monitors, it's folks that are teachers, it's counselors, it's folks that are working in our schools every day. That's the personnel. So we'll always be a high percentage of our general fund going to personnel. The average is 81, 82%, somewhere in there. So if you look at our upward trend, though, there's some things that we spend that other districts don't spend because we do it in-house with our folks, and quite frankly, we think we do it better and cheaper than if we had to farm it out. First, if you look back at our 5-year forecast, in 2021, purchase services were $27.6 million. That was 18.6 of expenditures. So clearly that was moving the line of how we spend money on personnel down. But that was charter school money that was really, we were just a pass-through. And so they changed the funding formulas, and they said, well, we're just going to send the money right to the charter schools. And that's fine. It's actually, in that regard, somewhat easier for us because it's less bookkeeping. But it did, as you couldn't write that piece off anymore, it drove how we spend money on personnel up. And so now, if you look at purchase services, it's only 8% of expenditures because you don't see the charter school deduction anymore. And you used to see the charter school deduction. We also minimize contracting out or purchasing services. And instead, we use our own personnel. And we don't do that because we love these folks, although we do love a lot of them. We do it because it's a better service and it's cheaper. So as an example, our print shop. When I came in, I was skeptical of our print shop, in all honesty. I thought, why can't we just have copy machines in the building or, send a lot of stuff out? I mean, I asked those questions. And so we actually brought in Xerox and Comdeck was the source that studied sort of, is this something that makes sense financially for you? And if you look, 30 million impressions, which is what we do in a year. 30 million, some type of copy, which is obviously pretty daunting. If we sent that out, we'd spend $3 million. We do it in-house, 30 million impressions, and the cost is $750,000, savings of $2.25 million. That's extremely significant. Now, that cost is for both the folks that work in the print shop and the materials. So yes, our personnel, the percentage of money that we spend on personnel has increased because we do that ourselves, but notice the bottom line is minus $2.25 million. And quite frankly, if you've ever met Dan Saloom, we're awful proud of the work that we do in that area. And I think our teachers would say, it's amazing. I send an order to the copy machine or the copy center or print shop, and it's in my mailbox tomorrow. Mechanics. Mechanics are something that we have continued to work with in-house. We're actually very fortunate in that. But we've also been aggressive in trying to get them some more income because we know that they could leave us and make considerably more money on the open market than they do. Fairview Park partners with us right now. It's a regional partnership. We're always looking to partner. We're 9,000 kids. We should be a hub of resources in Northeast Ohio. Fairview Park pays $12 to $17.25 more per hour to use our mechanics. And again, these are just some examples of how using our folks saves us money. Imagine if it was the other way, right? If we had to send our buses to Fairview Park, now we're the ones paying $12 or $17.25. Now it would drive purchase services down or drive spending on personnel down, but purchase services would go up. We're proud of the work that our folks do. DIS, we manage our own network instead of purchasing services. We did a little bit of research in the KR group, which does these estimates, $42,000 a year for building coverage plus $20 per user, $212,000, plus a service charge for each request that we would have to call them. Our DIS folks handled that. So again, yes, personnel is 87%, but when we look at why, we think the value to our Parma taxpayers and our Parma residents and our Parma students and teachers is higher. We also, and this is a big one, folks, we have our own career tech programs right here. And it's the last bullet, but I'm going to explain quickly why this is better. When you don't have your own career tech, you share, and you're at the whims of other school districts, other entities like Polaris, for instance. So when we have welding, as an example, we could provide every seat in that welding program. 27 in the morning, 27 in the afternoon, as opposed to hoping that we could maybe get 6, maybe get 8 if other districts aren't using it. But that costs money. We spend $4.1 million in career tech program teachers, salaries and benefits, about 30 FTEs in CTE. That costs money. It drives up personnel spending. But again, the advantage is we've got 1,000 kids in career tech in our high schools. That's insane. It's unheard of. Nobody does that. 33%. They're coming out with industrial certifications. They're coming out with tracks into professions, not just coming out with some idea of what I want to be. They've got steps into it. They've got certifications that are preparing them for jobs. But yes, if you want to get on the 87%, it is higher. But these are the reasons why. Look at ACES. ACES was something we started, and there's some folks in the audience that might remember this, some of my worst nights in Parma. We were going to put it right at Renwood. Disaster. Came in my first year, we were going to change Renwood into a center for students with autism. Unmitigated disaster. We backed out of there quickly. But the idea was sound. The planning and the implementation was horrendous. We said, we've got to do this. We have both a moral and a fiscal imperative to educate our kids to the extent that we can in-house. We keep contact with them. Often when students go to an external placement, guess what? They're gone. That's where they are. That's where they finish. We want to keep them in-house. We want our teachers to work with them. We want them to go to school in our neighborhoods. So ACES is something that we have opened first at Parma Senior High, and now obviously that we are demolishing Parma Senior High, we're over at Parma Park. These are conservative estimates of the savings that ACES has actually brought to our district since it opened. And conservative because we are using a very broad term or very broad estimate of tuition in that we're just saying $100,000. Folks, $100,000 is essentially a minimum for an outplacement for a child with autism. District expenses, that includes all the staff, included the director that we used to have at ACES. Now we share a special education supervisor. So the first year we had 8 students. We projected savings at $358,000. Second year we were up to 16, $929,000 we saved. 2022-23 we are at $2.4 million. 24 students, savings of 1.6. Now we're up to 27 students. And honestly, they are personally a delight. I love that we are at Parma Park and we're seeing these kids every day and interacting with them, and it's been rejuvenating to be, from my seat, dealing with, working with children again. So all told, since the opening of ACES, $4.6 million in savings. So I said we were going to stop every 3 and see if there are any questions that I can try to answer. Again, acknowledging that I may have to punt.
I don't really have a question, but more of a clarification with the ESSER funds, just so everybody understands. The government allotted that you had to spend the money in certain categories.
That's correct.
So that's why we spent money. Because I remember this from being in the business committee, but that's why we spent money on Byers Field, on the lighting in the field, is because they said you had to use this money for certain things. So it wasn't that we just decided we're not going to hire a teacher, we want new lights.
That's correct. There were certain specifications of what and then how much you had to spend, and there were actually some limits on supplanting. So yeah, that's a point well taken.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I follow up with that? So just to be clear and transparent, I was waiting for him to be finished all the way through, but since you brought it up. So we did not use that money to give raises to our staff. Is that correct? Yes, she's speaking on microphone. We did not use
There
that
are
money
other,
for staff.
you could argue that in that $21 million, you could argue that, some of that certainly, as you look at you spend it on personnel, if personnel was getting more expensive and our raises were extremely modest, I think it was 3%, 2.5%, 2.5% in the 3-year contract that we're in right now. Other districts honestly handed teachers checks from ESSER. We never did that. You could argue that, again, as personnel went, that's why it was more, but there was never a direct payment out of ESSER funds for raises. There were not stipends given specifically for, whatever some districts creatively, work to call theirs.
Thank you.
So, just to follow up with that, so just to clarify, anything that was considered a raise was basically a collective bargaining agreement that was agreed upon between the board and the union?
Correct. And I know Ms. Messinger is here right now, and we'll get to this in a few minutes, but I have to, when I said before about how we've pushed this deficit from 2022 to 2027, we couldn't do that without realistic expectations from our teachers union. And that starts with Ms. Messinger's leadership. They didn't come to us and say, oh my gosh, you've got this COVID money, we better be looking at 6 and 7 and 8%. And I promise you, and I know that happened in other districts. We went 3%, 2.5%, 2.5%, which I think is very modest and again reflects PEA's understanding and Ms. Messinger's understanding of the financial outlook in Parma. Mark?
That's it.
Okay. Number 7, and again, we'll stop every 3 and take questions. Again, realizing, it's the first time the board's seen the document, so they may have questions afterward, and this is a working document. We can always come back and clarify, but I felt like it was important to establish a baseline relatively early in terms of what we've done financially. We feature a very lean central office. Now, here's the truth about central offices. They're sort of hard to compare because different positions are called different things in different central offices, so I would love to give you a direct comparison between Parma and Berea, but I don't know how they use their director of student support. I don't know what that means in Berea, so we really can't give a direct comparison. But what I can tell you is that we have reduced spending at the central office by $1.8 million since 2018. It will always be sort of a core of our belief that resources belong in schools, not central offices. Now, that said, you certainly have to have some administrators at the central office because there's still an awful lot of work that needs to occur. So in 2018, and these are just some examples of reductions. We had, as an example, an elementary and a secondary curriculum director, both 6-figure positions. We reduced that by 1. Now we have 1 executive director of curriculum. We had 4 district special education supervisors. Now we have 2. Cut that right in half from 2018 to 2019. We had a full director of federal programs. We abolished the position. Ms. Plageman actually has career tech and federal programs. And I promise you can tell you every number of every account in both of those. It's pretty amazing. We had a lead mentor teacher. Quite frankly, I was never sure what that person did. I loved her. Great person. That's not at all about the person. But the position, we abolished. Director of Student Services, I felt it was redundant. Felt that we had we had a Director of Student Services and a Director of Special Education, and we abolished the position of Director of Student Services. So those are just some examples. We've continued to do that over the years, but the major cut, the major piece of that $1.8 million came in 2018. In 2022, we sat down and we said, listen, we're looking at a bond issue. We're not going to be able to go for new money anytime soon, new operating money. How can we tighten our belt? And what we said was we used the phrase actually, trim around the edges, meaning we don't want to cut into class sizes and we don't want to go to pay for play, some of those nuclear options that we speak about, but we took hard looks at reductions in bus duty stipends, monitor positions, teachers. Now, again, not dramatic cuts. Our class sizes are very palatable. Lunch supervision assignments, special education assistants. So just where we thought there was a little bit we could trim without really cutting into services, we went ahead and did that. And again, that's not a $1.3 million one-time savings. That rolls over for the next year and the next year, because we haven't brought those positions back either. In 2023, certainly we're all familiar with this, and we've all lived a hard walk in terms of what we were able to work through with consolidation. But that, as painful as it was, created $3.2 million in savings. PSH was a $2.7 million price tag. For us to be able to close it and move everyone, we're saving $2.7 million in operating money. That's supplemental positions, that's utilities, support staff, administration, security. Renwood is a $462,000 savings. Parma Park savings is a little bit less because you know that we still are at Parma Park, and so we still operate there with our PAGE, PACS, and ACES programs, but still a $217,000 savings. We then had certified staff, and the reason that that is its own line is you can't necessarily attribute that to one school, or essentially, you know, that's just efficiency. When you have fewer sections that you have to operate, because now you're not at 3 high schools, you're not at 8 elementary schools anymore, there's always going to be economy of scale. And so that allowed us to have 6 teachers that were directly attributed to the consolidation. So if you add all that up, it's a little bit more than $3.2 million, but we also added back high school transportation. I can promise you this as well, no one is adding transportation. No one. And yet we did that this year because we knew going from 3 to 2, we were going to have an awful lot of high school students that were going to have an awful long way to go. And so we've been able to balance that with the savings in the other ways. Now my hope would be that we never even have to examine that. But high school busing is not required. You can say we don't have any busing for high school students. That's legal. And then all you're doing is busing students who it specifies on their individualized education plan. So that was another piece that factored into that. Net savings, though, $3.2 million. And again, that's not a one-time savings. That's a savings continually. So we said 3, that was 7, 8, and 9. Questions?
We're good.
All right, moving on to number 10. I didn't even realize this until we got the data, and we got the data last night, but our teacher's starting salary at both the bachelor's and master's degree are the lowest in Cuyahoga County. Now, I have to specify something because I want to be very clear. I know the cameras are running. There are a couple districts that were not on the report. So I do have to say we're certainly in the lowest. I can't emphatically say that we are the lowest because there are 2 that I have to track down that were not on the chart that I got from the ESC. They were Richmond Heights and Bedford, and they would probably be right around us as well. Nevertheless, even if it isn't the lowest, it's like the 3rd lowest in Cuyahoga County. And these are the bottom 5 that you see. And again, I'll track down Richmond Heights and Bedford before we have, sort of solidify this. But those are our bottom starting salaries in Cuyahoga County. So when we say, spending is high on personnel, I always hope that we go back and we look at the reason isn't highly paid teachers, friends. The reason certainly isn't highly paid classified staff. The reason isn't we have too many administrators. The reasons are we have our own career tech. We do so many things in-house because we do them better and we do them cheaper. We have ACES, which is our payroll instead of paying tuition externally. Some would say, okay, well that's your, starting salary, but you might escalate those teachers very quickly. Now, every teacher pay scale in Northeast Ohio has steps. I would imagine it's true of every teacher pay scale in Ohio, but I haven't actually looked at those. And steps mean teachers move in pay in 2 ways. They move horizontally and vertically. That's based on how many years they've been here. So you'll move from 1 to 2 to 3. The horizontal movement is actually due to increased education. And so some would say, well, you're probably escalating those steps quickly. Well, if you look, here's our average teacher salary. And again, we're low. North Olmsted, our average teacher salary is at $92,000. Rexville Broadview Heights, 91. Independence, 86. North Royalton, 83. Brooklyn, 82. Cuyahoga Heights, 82. We're at 81. A big piece of that is not because we've been very aggressive at escalating their salaries, but because we have 136 teachers, or 18%, at their 25th year or above. Those folks are at the top of the pay scale. Now, to be creative and proactive in trying to address that, we've offered an early retirement incentive program. Because when you can replace a teacher who's making $90,000, they have 28 years and a master's plus however many hours, with a teacher who's new to the profession and they're making 45, well, that's a significant savings. And so that's what the early retirement incentive that our board approved in December is all about. Number 12 is, I will preface this by saying that we could write a dissertation on special education funding and expenses and still leave questions that are unanswered. But I think one piece that I think is easy to sort of conceptualize, it's expensive for us, both for the students that we educate inside the district and those that choose a different option. In the last presentation, and I know what he meant, but the gentleman, Mr. Pendleton, kind of, he said it's a drain. And it's not, he didn't mean it that way. He was simply looking at finances. But special education is 17.6% of our students. 1,600 of our students in district have some type of disability. I talked before about moral imperative. Our moral imperative as a public school system is to figure out how to give those students the best possible education in the least restrictive environment. It's expensive because the numbers are smaller. The state dictates class size ratio. The state dictates how many students a teacher can have in terms of how many IEPs they're going to write. Those are state dictated. And we follow them. A, it's legal, but B, it's best for kids. So if you look, Mr. Nucio and I looked over this, and in all honesty, our eyes can glaze over, but essentially, our district expenditure for instruction in 2023 on special education was $30.7 million. State, did they step up and give us any money? $2.8 million. $2.8 million came from the state. Catastrophic costs, which means if you have a child, and we've had, I'm not going to try to speculate, but we've had children go to a school for the blind in Columbus. That's actually during my time here, we've had that. We've had a student who has a one-to-one teacher and a one-to-one nurse. So they would qualify what are called catastrophic costs, meaning the cost to educate them is so high we can get some money back on top of what the state sent us originally. Not a lot, though, $500,000. We can bill Medicaid for some services. $1.1 million is what we got last fiscal year. Federal support, they certainly step up more aggressively than the state. Title 6B is considered special education funding. That's $4.4 million. The John Peterson and Autism Scholarship, that's for children who qualify and their parents find it an alternative for them. We get $3 million back for those students. But see that local share. That's Parma taxpayers, $18.9 million. So when they say, well, the state sends you money for that, do they though? Those are Parma taxpayers. And it's 1,600 kids. And it's the families that you just saw tonight. And it's a moral imperative to provide everything we can as a public school system for those children. We also provide services to non-public schools in our district. This is state mandated, or state sort of managed. It all comes from IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act from 1976. Financial management for their title and auxiliary funds. Now, again, we get some money back from that, but it's coming down off of what we saw before. English learner testing, we send people to do that. Those are our employees who test students. Individualized service plans. So if a child's at a school that is a non-public school, and they qualify through an evaluation team report, which again is how we test students, then they don't get IEPs, they get individualized service plans. Very similar though. And so we're responsible for 85 of those. We send intervention specialists, speech therapists to 5 different schools. The John Peterson and Autism Scholarship Programs. Now here's where it gets really intricate. We have 200 students that would otherwise be our students in 45 different entities. And again, that's parent choice, and we don't begrudge parent choice, but we're explaining that this is a context that we work through. We complete the IEPs and the ETRs for all of those students if they go to a school within our boundary. We also complete students or ETRs and for students even if they aren't Parma residents. I never knew this until I was preparing for tonight. So for if you live somewhere else, but you choose through the Autism or JP, John Peterson Scholarship, to attend a school, let's say Horizon Academy over on, I think that's Stump Road, we end up having to do that ETR. Now, some have suggested or some have asked, well, I look at what you're paying, and couldn't you just sort of outsource that? First of all, there'd be an awful lot of issues to work through in terms of, is that a union issue? I mean, it's collective bargaining work. There are districts working through that right now, lawsuits pending for districts that have hired third parties. But even when you look, the hourly rate for a school psychologist right now, $82 an hour. If you multiply that, 184 school days times 8-hour work days, that's $120,000 a year. Now, yeah, some of our folks, if they're at the end of the pay scale and they've got some credit, and they may be making that in salary, and then we pay for benefits too. But we also, our school psychologists aren't a teacher pay scale. So some of them are making $45,000, they're right out of school. So the contracting out piece is just, it's also not a practical option. That was 3. I said I would stop after every 3. Questions?
You mentioned that we're paying for ETRs for residents that are outside of the district? Or we're paying for ETRs for residents that choose to send their children to a school outside of the district?
If somebody lives outside the district, but they send them to a school,
Outside.
I think I botched I thought it was Horizon, something like that over on Stump the Road there. That's, we pay for the ETR then, yeah, which is really bizarre.
But they live in the district?
No, that for an external resident, I mean.
For an external resident?
That's correct. But they go to school here, and not one of our schools, but a private school in the district, we're responsible for it, which is amazing to me.
That's interesting.
The last piece, and we don't have to go through all of these, but, and again, thank you really to all of our senior leadership team and principals, and we all look for external funding. But what I listed for you are only the services or grants that we've attained in the last 4 or 5 years that were $50,000 or more. So we know that there's other grants that are smaller, but I didn't want to list all of those. But what I use this to show, and we don't have to go through all of them, but we're extremely aggressive in turning to other sources for funding and or programming that benefits our children. Again, we live the mindset, practice fiscal responsibility. And so what I would close by is that as we sit here in January of 2024, knowing that there's a deficit looming 2027, we are not at a place where we can cut our way out of that. There may be a little bit of edges we can trim again. Certainly as enrollment declines, which it often does, you can, a couple teachers here or there. depending on where they move out and what grade levels they might have been. But that's not going to get rid of an $18.4 million deficit in 2027. And so we've always called these the nuclear options. What are we really trying to avoid? Why do we live with the mindset of we have to be fiscally responsible? Because we never want to get untenable class sizes. 28 is absolutely a soft cap to me in our secondary, and certainly hopefully below that in our elementary. I know we have some above it, but we really try to keep it 25 and below in elementary. We can go to 28, maybe 30 in the secondary level. But much more than that, we will not, our teachers will melt. Our teachers will not be able to meet student needs. High pay for play participating fees. And I think we've all heard stories about that. I know Mr. Vaughn's told a story about this. I know Ms. Kerpick has as well, although I think hers was the last piece. And then the other piece is limiting high school students to 5 classes. I mean, you can do that. You can say, sign up for your 5, better pass them all, you get 20 credits by the time you're a senior, good luck with your life. Those are the nuclear options. And so what we're laying the groundwork for at the next meeting, Mr. Nucio is going to show us what type of millage would we need to look at in November, if the board elects to go forward in November, to eradicate that 2027 deficit. Because cutting isn't going to get us there. Cutting is the way that we've gone from 2011 to 2024 without any new money. So I thank you. I know it was a long presentation, but I think a lot of these numbers are eye-opening. Some of the facts and figures and things that we have to do, I think people have no idea of. I know I didn't know about that ETR piece, Mrs. McTaggart, that you just asked about. That was a learning experience for me as well. Any questions or comments?
Not at this point. We all understand what's facing us, so.
Wasn't necessarily meant at you, Mr. Ruda. There's an audience out there, sir.
Oh, I didn't know we were taking questions from the audience.
No, we're not. I just mean,
Oh, okay.
I have one, I'm not sure, one blindside, so.
Mrs. Kohar has a question.
Can I say something?
How much,
Oh,
if
no,
at
I
all,
think Linda is already.
does the voucher system impact our finances?
The voucher system doesn't necessarily impact our finances because those that's not money that we get and then we have to give to somebody else. That's money that the state has said, okay, we've got this essentially $2 billion over 2 years, and we think that choice should be an option for our families, and so we'll let them do that. Some public schools are actually suing the state, and the argument is that you are failing to fund adequate education as called for by the Constitution of Ohio. But the lawyers or consultants that we've spoken with say they'll never win that because actually what's happened is, yes, the $2 billion went to private school vouchers, but public schools also got more money. So what do vouchers actually cost us? They don't. What I've espoused is sort of a fear of, what do public schools become then? If everybody who takes that voucher is somebody that passes tests, for instance, what happens to our school cultures, what happens to our achievement levels, what happens to peer role models in special education classes? It's more of a cultural fear for me. But in terms of dollars and cents, a voucher doesn't cost us.
Just to add something, the public school system, if the child is going to a school outside of the public school system, the public school still receives the tax dollars from the community.
Well, those tax dollars are not predicated.
The local tax dollars.
Those tax dollars are not predicated on students. So state funding comes specifically for a student, but local property taxes are just a tax. That's regardless of
So
any
even when
enrollment.
the student, so from the family in the district, and say they have 2 children that they decide to send to private school and they're receiving Ed Choice, so the money that they're receiving from Ed Choice comes from the state. The money that they're paying in tax dollars still go to the school, even though those students aren't present at the school.
That's correct. That's property taxes, yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Steve, you had-
I forgot what I wanted to say. Actually, Charlie, thank you very much for this. It's very detailed, and if anybody has questions about that and don't understand, they just, one, aren't paying attention, and two, or don't care to pay attention. Is there a way, are you going to put this out some way?
We will. We'll put this on the website. We'll put it on
the
social
website.
media. The one thing,
For
again,
questions.
I just, and I caught myself, I thought I had every district in Cuyahoga County. We have to go back and look at that because, as I said, I specifically need to check on Richmond Heights and Bedford on teacher salary.
Right, so you're going to put something out there where people can ask questions if they have questions about this?
We can do that. We have a town hall coming up as well. We have two town halls
perfect.
coming up as well.
That's perfect.
And we always look forward to taking questions there. Certainly, people can come to board meetings and ask questions as well.
Yeah, I did one last comment, at number 14, about cutting out. I do not want to see us ever go back that way. That was horrible. It was horrible when I taught. It was horrible when I was coaching. And I'm sure as a student, which one of my daughters was in the high school at that time, I'm sure it was horrible for her. We have a board member up here that was in school at that time, and I'm sure she can attest to it that it was horrible. We do not want to go backwards. We have fought hard to get to where we are with no new money. I think that's fabulous. I've seen our athletic teams increase over time. It was devastating when it was pay to play. It was absolutely devastating to our athletic programs. And I shared that story before about a young man, I think it was my second to last year of teaching, and he wanted to play football, and his mom sold her dining room set so he could play. And he actually didn't even play. He stood on the sidelines with the uniform on. So that should never, ever happen again. Never. Thanks.
I concur. No, thank you for this information.
You're welcome. I think it'll be helpful as we work through, potentially looking at a campaign or ask for new money.
All right, well, that'll take us to communications now. Any communications? Sean,
I do not have anything tonight.
do we have a PTA report?
We do. Mrs.
We do?
Ketsche is here,
All right. Oh, I gotta put my
fresh from
glasses on.
her
Now I can see you.
from her trip. Can you tell us about your trip too?
I don't have time for that.
All right.
Yeah, no, I was in Nigeria for my father-in-law's funeral for the past few weeks. So it was a great experience. There was a lot that I got to see and enjoy, regardless of the fact that that's what we were there for. So, yeah, trying to play catch up. 6-hour time difference really isn't working with it. So, all right. Good evening from Parma Council PTA. My name is Heather Ketsche, and I am the current council president. I do apologize for not sending a new board member email that we usually send out welcoming you. As Charlie had said, I actually had another death in the family right before Christmas and then rolled into our trip overseas. So I'm kind of playing catch up. I do want to thank my officers who stepped in while I was gone, and especially Delina, who ran our meetings for the January meeting. On Wednesday, December 6th, Parma Council PTA hosted its winter luncheon. Thank you to all the guests that were in attendance from central office, our buildings, and our PTA units. It was a very festive and fun afternoon. We are currently accepting nominations for our annual Tea in PTA Helping Hands Awards and Special Education Advocate Award. The winners of these awards will be invited to and honored at our spring installation dinner in April. Our scholarship program is well underway with our seniors. Thank you for supporting the scholarship program by sponsoring a scholarship. We are in our 71st year of scholarship, and we are excited to read the applications of our many deserving seniors. On February 7th at 6 p.m., we will be having a scholarship workshop for the scholarship sponsors right here in our cafeteria. We encourage all new board members to attend. We are very excited to host the special Parma Council PTA Scholarship Awards Night and Reception at Normandy High School this year on Wednesday, May 15th. This will be when our families and students learn what scholarships they have won and a time to celebrate all of our students and sponsors. On February 7th will be our next council meeting at 7 p.m., also here at Normandy High School in the cafeteria. We hope that one of our board members can attend and give a report. February 10th is our Parma Council PTA Monsters Hockey Night. We have over 150 friends and families joining us for the night of hockey. All proceeds from ticket sales and the 50-50 raffle go towards our scholarship program. On February 21st, Parma Council PTA will be hosting their annual Reflections and Calendar Artists Night. The event takes place at 6:30 p.m. in Valley Forge Auditorium. Invitations are being sent out to the students being recognized and their families. However, all district employees and board members are welcome to attend. We have several student entries moving on to the state level. Finally, we are offering our annual babysitting course for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders this year on March 2nd and March 9th that will be held here at Normandy Cafeteria. Information has been delivered to all the middle schools, and our reservations are quickly filling up. Thank you, and rock on from Parma Council PTA.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and welcome back.
Thanks.
Yes. All right, that moves us to public participation. At this point, we open the meeting to the public to address the board on tonight's agenda items. Tammy, you didn't, because it doesn't say whether it's on an agenda item or open at the end. So it's for this part?
Yes.
Okay.
You good with me?
Yeah, go ahead. Just state your name and
Tammy Sebastian, I know the
Yeah.
drill. Tammy Sebastian, 6814 Rivera. So I'm speaking about two resolutions. Resolution number 2024-01-24, the auction of property owned by the board, which I believe is Hannah, that you guys are going to be voting on tonight. So I'm just going to ask that before the board votes on this tonight, I would encourage the board to think about their ethical responsibilities that they took when they came onto the board on whether or not this could be potentially a conflict of interest, which kind of leads me into the second resolution that you guys are adopting tonight.
Okay,
Do you
go
want me to
ahead.
hop into that, or do you
go
want me
ahead.
to keep
Because I was
explaining?
just confused of how the conflict of interest.
They were on the agenda for this week. 2024.
Yeah.
So do you just want me to move it to the next?
Hold
I
on,
mean, it
Hannah
still
is on
holds
here. I just
true.
think you have the wrong number.
31.
Yeah, it's 31.
Oh, good, because I was looking for 24.
Are you guys talking about
There's two
Hannah
different
tonight?
numbers, which is a
Hannah's the-
clerical error. On the resolution, on the business agenda, it says 31. When you click on it, it says 24.
So are you
It's-
guys not
No,
talking
it's
about the
just-
auction of
it's
Hannah tonight?
31 is the number.
Okay,
Yeah,
but you guys are talking about the auction of Hannah tonight? I just
correct.
wanted-
We're offering
okay.
up to auction, yes.
So just because I don't have the resolution
No,
number.
you're fine. I was just trying to
31.
figure out.
Okay. Okay, so going back to what I was saying is, before the board votes on that, I'm going to ask you to talk about or look at the ethical responsibilities of a board member and the conflict of interest, which is another resolution that you guys are voting on tonight, which I'm going to get into. There is a board member that is currently sitting that owns a real estate company, and that could potentially look like a conflict of interest. And I can go into the next policy and why that looks like that. But I would ask that that board member abstain from voting on any real estate or sale of properties until you guys have had that discussion, or if you guys feel comfortable and feel like that is something that you feel comfortable moving forward with. But I would not want something to happen that was irreversible. So that kind of leads me into the next question I have on resolution. I probably don't have this number right either, but it's on the policies that you will be adopting. One of them is conflict of interest, and it says that it's not even about whether or not it's a conflict of interest, it's about the optics of whether or not it could appear to be a conflict of interest. And that's why I'm saying I would encourage you to look at that policy It's really hard, though, for the general public to understand whether those were Neola amendments on the policy or if that was a board-driven intention on changing that, because we don't see strikeouts. You guys might see the strikeouts, we don't see the strikeouts. And I would also encourage the board to put the strikeouts out in the public on board docs so we understand what's being amended in the policies.
Are you speaking of the first reading of the, under policy?
I am.
Of those?
I
Okay,
am.
it's just a first reading tonight. We're not approving it.
It does,
It's-
and that's okay, but it's still important for transparency.
I understand.
Okay,
I understand.
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and I believe almost all of them are either Neola changes or just updating the date of it because they haven't been done before. Those ones I can't speak specifically to right now. I could ask. Charlie, do you know? which those
Yeah,
were?
none of these had any really substantive changes. I understand the point about the strike-throughs. If the board would like to entertain that, that's something we can look at. I will tell you that, and Mr. Ruda, you've been on the policy agenda, or the policy meeting, I mean, I'd say about 98% of what we do is either, check a box that comes from Neola. And just for the general public too, Neola is a policy agency that, there's a couple different in Ohio, but approximately half of the districts in Ohio subscribe to Neola, and what they do is they're that go-between between legislation at the state level and then, policy on school districts, and so they make sure that you're current. And for the most part, honestly, they do your work for you. Most of it is, just transposing legislation into, but, again, that's definitely something we can have that conversation. We have a policy meeting next week, so if we want to talk about that, we can. It's an extra step, but it is doable.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I
Thank
understand.
you.
I understand your concern.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, that brings us on to, I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-29, amending the agenda for tonight, taking Resolution 2024-01-48 off of the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Resolution 2024-01-29. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart.
Yes.
Ms. Kohar.
Yes.
Ms. Kerpeck.
Yes.
Resolution 2024-09-29 has been approved.
Mr. Ruda, can I just interject for a second? I really appreciate that we have some transportation employees that have come tonight. Thank you for giving up your time, and I believe you were here, about that policy or that specific resolution, and unfortunately, we are not able to move forward tonight with that. So certainly more than welcome to stay, but I just wanted to make sure you understood where we've tabled that for now.
Thank you. Okay, I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-30, approval of the written record of proceedings from the January 16th, 2024 special work session.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2024-01-30. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart.
Yes.
Ms. Kohar.
Yes.
Ms. Kerpeck.
Yes.
Resolution 2024-01-30 has been approved. So that brings us now, to curriculum, yes?
Business.
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 Oh, I might ask curriculum first. Okay, I'm sorry, business first.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-31, authorizing the sale at public auction of real property owned by the Parma City School District Board of Education and no longer needed for school purposes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Resolution 2024-01-31. Any questions or comments from the board? Recuse yourself. You can recuse yourself.
I don't. Why would I?
Just,
No.
all right, seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart.
Yes.
Ms. Kohar.
Yes.
Ms. Kerpeck.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-31 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-32, declaring select pupil impractical to transport for the 2022-2023 school year.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Resolution 2024-01-32. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Cohar,
Yes.
Ms. Krupek,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-32 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-33, amending agreement with University Hospitals Health Systems for sports medicine services.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Resolution 2024-01-33. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Cohar,
Yes.
Ms. Krupek,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-33 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-34, authorizing the purchase of access points through the federal E-rate program and contingent on funding from the federal E-rate program.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Resolution 2024-01-34. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Cohar,
Yes.
Ms. Krupek,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-34 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-35, authorizing fee proposal for professional design firm for the expansion of career technical education facilities at Normandy High School.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Resolution 2024-01-35. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Cohar,
Yes.
Ms. Krupek,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-35 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-36, approval of revised district mileage chart.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Resolution 2024-01-36. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Cohar,
Yes.
Ms. Krupek,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-36 has been approved.
Unless another board member has anything to discuss,
This will conclude business.
this concludes business.
Thank you very much. This takes us to curriculum, Mr. Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Ruda. I'd move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-37, approval to enter into a memorandum of understanding between the Parma City School District and Kent State University.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-37. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Ms. Krupek,
Yes.
Ms. Cohar,
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-37 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-38, authorization to amend Resolution 2023-12-621.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2024-01-38. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Ms. Krupek,
Yes.
Ms. Cohar,
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-38 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-39, approval of the 2024-2025 PVLA High School Course Guide.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-39. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Ms. Krupek,
Yes.
Ms. Cohar,
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-39 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-40, approval of the overnight out-of-state field trips.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-40. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Ms. Krupek,
Yes.
Ms. Cohar,
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-40 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-41, approval of the 2024-2025 school year calendar.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-41. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Ms. Kerpeck,
Yes.
Ms. Kohar,
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-41 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-42, granting authority to the administration to enter into a contract with Bright Futures for the 2023-2024 school year.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-42. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Ms. Kerpeck,
Yes.
Ms. Kohar,
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-42 has been approved.
Unless another board member has anything to discuss, this will conclude curriculum tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn.
Tongue-tied on that one.
Now to finance. Isn't that you again, Mr. Vaughn?
Doggone it. Yes, sir, it is. All right, sorry, my bad. I was going to get a sip of water. All right, so I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-43, approval of the December 2023 financial report.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-43. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Kohar,
Yes.
Ms. Kerpeck,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-43 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-44, ratification of investments.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-44. Any questions or comments from the board?
Can I ask what the investments are?
Most of our investments are through either Star Ohio, which is a state-run, it's like a savings account with all governments can invest in. And then we have investments through U.S. Bank, which we're very limited on what we're allowed to invest in. And that's managed by Meter Investments. And if you would like to see it, I could show you all the investments we have through them. But most of them are through some government agencies like Federal Farm Bureau or Freddie Mac or Sallie Mae. And we have short-term debt we're allowed to sell, like for AAA companies like Toyota or Ford, GM. It can only be 9 months debt, 9 months credit. So that's what we invest in.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Kohar,
Yes.
Ms. Kerpeck,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-44 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-45, approval of the then and now certificates over $3,000 for 2023-24.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-45. Any questions or comments from the board?
Want to explain this?
Yeah, this is one, it's what I usually call it all-call, but it's the robocall you'll get if your kid's school is canceled, snow day, that says, okay, Parma schools are closed for this day. And this usually comes out of the PR department. But we had a lot of turnover, and the new employee, when she started, saw that this was not done and did the resolution, but we already had the invoice. So it's something we use and something we should pay for. Otherwise,
Right.
the vendor's not going to
It's not paid
use
in a
us
timely
anymore.
fashion, or what happened here?
Yeah, it was
Is that what you're
just
saying?
turnover.
You missed it?
Turnover employees, and the new employee recognized that it wasn't done.
Okay. Well, good for her.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart.
Yes.
Ms. Kohar.
Yes.
Ms. Kerpeck.
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-45 has been approved.
Unless another board member has anything to discuss, this will conclude finance this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. That takes us to legislation. Linda, do we have anything from OSBA yet?
No, we do not.
Not yet. Thank you. Human Resources, then. Mrs. McTaggart.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-46, approval of the following certified exhibits: confirmation of certified appointments, confirmation of stipend amounts, confirmation of supplemental appointments, confirmation of supplemental contracts.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-46. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Kerpick,
Yes.
Ms. Kohar,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-46 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-47, acceptance of certificated retirements.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-47. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Kerpick,
Yes.
Ms. Kohar,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-47 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-49, approval of the following classified exhibits: confirmation of classified appointments, replacements, confirmation of change of classified assignments, acceptance of classified resignations, approval of classified non-compensated leaves of absence.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-49. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Kerpick,
Yes.
Ms. Kohar,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-49 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-50, acceptance of classified retirements.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-50. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Kerpick,
Yes.
Ms. Kohar,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-50 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-51, approval of classified long-term leaves of absences in accordance with ORC 3309.41.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on Resolution 2024-01-51. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Kerpick,
Yes.
Ms. Kohar,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Ruda.
Yes. Resolution 2024-01-51 has been approved.
Unless another board member has anything to discuss, this concludes Human Resources.
Thank you very much. Takes us to policies. Mrs. Kohar.
First reading of the following revised policies. Policy 0141.2, conflict of interest. Policy 0164, notice of meetings. Policy 5320, immunization. Policy 8210, school calendar.
Thank you. Is that all for policy?
That is all.
Okay. This takes us to information for the board. Anybody have any information they requested? Nothing? No questions to be read into the record? No public comment or anything? Just this one?
No, we don't have anything,
Nothing.
just that one.
All right, then. I gotta find this.
Interesting.
All right. I move to adopt Resolution 2024-01-52. Executive, this is for the executive session, relative to security arrangements.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2024-01-52. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call, please, Mr. Nucio.
Mr. Ruda,
Yes.
Ms. Kohar,
Yes.
Mrs. McTaggart,
Yes.
Ms. Kerpick,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Time is, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Parma City School District hereby adjourns to executive session at
7:24.
7:24 PM relative to security arrangements. Please note that Ohio law provides school boards may meet in executive session to discuss legal issues, property issues, and personnel issues. Because of the confidential nature of these issues, this part of the meeting is closed to the general public, and the matters to be discussed are not specifically listed on the agenda. No resolution will be voted on during executive session. All voting must take place in open session. We are adjourned.
We'll go to the back of the meeting center.
Yes.
You adjourn the meeting.